I stared at the frozen turkey sitting on the counter. It was a 20 lb bird, solid as stone, its surface damp in the ice I catch in air. The heating system had been malfunctioning all week, but my parents kept saying they'd deal with it after the holidays. My breath drifted out in small white clouds in front of me. My phone lit up on the counter, buzzing against the marble. A group chat alert. Mom had made one called Holiday Bliss. A picture loaded. My mother Susan holding a champagne flute, smiling wide. Beside her, my father Jeffrey in a linen shirt, looking completely at ease. And behind them, my twin sisters Ashley and Jessica, already in oversized sunglasses, capping glasses together in what was clearly a first-class cabin. The caption said, "Finally, some peace." Then another message appeared, simple and efficient. "Boarding now. See you in 10 days. House alarm is set. Don't wait up." I looked back at the turkey. I was 13 years old. I had no idea how to roast a turkey. I didn't know how to repair a furnace. And apparently, I wasn't worth a seat on that plane. I didn't cry. I didn't text back to ask why. I just stood there in the cold, understanding that family was a word they used when it benefited them. And at that moment, it didn't include me. Drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know as part of our community. The silence in the house felt thick, like something pressing against my eardrums. I couldn't cook the turkey, so I dug through the freezer and found a frozen burrito shoved in the back. It was old, crusted in ice crystals, but it was food. I put it in the microwave and it started. The low mechanical hum was only soundproofing. The house WASN single quotes tab and on ed. Then a sharp pop. The hum cut off. The tiny yellow display light disappeared. The refrigerator groaned once and went still. That borer was gone. I stood in the sudden, total darkness off the kitchen. The cold that had been lurking along the walls now seemed to fled forward and take over. My breath was no longer visible, swallowed by the black. I didn't scream. I didn't spiral. I calculated. I had a coat. I had blankets. If I stayed in one room, I could make it through the night. That's when headlights sliced across the kitchen window. Two sharp beams of white light cut through the dark, catching dust particles suspended in the frozen air. A vehicle was turning into the driveway. For one brief, humiliating second, asthma hopeful part of me thought they had come back. That they had realized you don't leave a 13-year-old alone for 10 days. I rushed to the window. It wasn't my parents' sedan. It was a massive matte black SUV, idling like something patient and dangerous at the gate. A man stepped out, tall, wrapped in a heavy wool coat that probably cost more than my mother's car. He didn't hurry. He moved toward the front door with the calm, deliberate stride of someone who never questions whether he belongs somewhere. The doorbell couldn't ring, no. Power booth's firm knock echoed through the entryway. I opened the door. I knew who he was, even though I'd only seen him in quiet conversations at funerals or in the background of old photo albums. Uncle Robert, the outcast, the billionaire industrialist my father called soulless and my mother labeled dangerous. He didn't greet me. No hug. No polite small talk. He studied me, my shaking hands, the dark house behind me, that gold air curling around us. Then looked past me into the unlit hallway. They armed the security system. Hesed, his voice rough as gravel, but forgot to arrange autopay for the electric bill. He stepped inside without waiting to buy invited. He removed one leather glove and checked his watch. "Uncle Robert," I said quietly. He looked down at me. His eyes were gray, sharp, completely free of pity. They weren't cruel. They were evaluating. "Pack a bag, Alyssa," he said. "Essentials only." "You are not remaining in a mausoleum. Where are we going?" "Away from here." I ran upstairs. I didn't grab toys. I didn't take the framed photo of my family from my knitstand. I packed clothes, full textbooks, and my laptop. It took 4 minutes when I came back down. He was in the kitchen staring at the 20 lb turkey still stranded on the counter, stiffened, useless. "Leave it," he said. "Let it spoil. It's fitting." I walked out the front door and slid into the passenger seat of the SUV. Interior smelled like expensive leather and filtered air. It was warmed out as we drove away. I watched my childhood home shrink in the rear view. Mirror consumed by darkness. I didn't understand it then, but I had just crossed a line. I was stepping out off the world of the forgotten and into the world of the builders, living with Uncle. Robert wasn't about comfort. It was about RECALIBRATION. His house, a brutalist fortress of concrete and glass perched on the edge of a cliff, didn't have cozy corners. It had sightlines. It had structure and energy. It had silence. Not the empty, terrifying silence of my parents' house, but a deliberate, heavy silence that felt like a shield. For the first few months, I tried to make myself invisible. I was an expert at it. I moved through rooms without making a sound. I ate it quickly, cleaned up immediately, and retreated to the guest room before anyone could remember I was there. I thought this was the rent I had to pay for existing. One evening, Robert found me sitting in the library, tucked into shadow of a bookshelf, watching him work at his desk. I froze, waiting to be reprimanded for lurking. He didn't look up from his documents. "You're doing a tag-in," he said, doing what I asked, my voice barely a whisper disappearing. "You think if you're quiet enough, you won't be a burden. You think silence is a deficit." He finally looked up, pinning with that gray analytical stare. "You're wrong. Silence is data." Hebecking me over. He pointed to a blueprint on his desk, a complex commercial development. "Tell me what you see." I looked at the lines. "I see a lobby, elevators, offices." "Look closer." "What do you see?" I hesitated. Then I let me natural. Instinct take over the instinct honed by 13 years of watching a family that never watched me back. "That flow is wrong," I said. "The reception desk faces the window, so the receptionist will be blinded by the afternoon sun. The elevators are too far from the main entrance, so people will congregate in the middle and block that flow. It's inefficient." Robert smiled. It was a terrifying, sharp thing. "Exactly. You see the flaws because you spend your life in the background watching how people move. Your family ignored you, Alyssa. They treated you like furniture. But while they were busy posing for photos, you were studying their room. You noticed the cracks in the foundation while they were admiring the paint." That was the moment the narrative shifted. He didn't offer me pity for being the forgotten child. He offered me job description. The gift of the shadow, he called it. The ability to see truth because no one thinks you're important enough to hide it from. "You didn't talk, Alyssa," he told me. "Yeah, watch. That isn't weakness. That is dangerous. That is power." From that day on, my education began. He didn't buy medals or video games. He bought me books in structural engineering, contract law, and negotiation tactics. He taught method architecture wasn't just about buildings. It was about controlling behavior. If you control the structure, you control the people inside it. My teenage years weren't marked by proms or football games. They were marked by city visits and board meetings where I sat in the corner taking notes on who was lying and who was desperate. I stopped checking my phone for texts from my mother. I stopped looking at the photos of their vacations in the Bahamas or the Alps. Those glossy images were just facades, and I was learning to look past cladding to the rotting beams underneath. I wasn't the abandoned daughter anymore. I was a project under construction, and the foundation was being poured with concrete, steel, and absolute cold resolve. By the time I was 16, I'd learned more about leverage than most adults learn in a lifetime. But there was one lesson left. I needed a workspace. My desk was a card table I'd salvaged from the basement, and it wobbled every time I erased a line. I found Robert in the solarium reviewing quarterly reports. "I need a new desk," I said, "and a drafting lamp. The lighting in my room is insufficient." He didn't look up. "How much?" $800. I blanked. He wasn't stingy. He drove cars that cost more than houses. Why not? Because buying new furniture teaches you nothing. Building it teaches you everything. He slid a check across the table. It was for $5,000. This is the yard budget. I don't want you to buy a desk, Alyssa. I want you to design a sanctuary. He looked at me then, high size boring into mine. Your family, Medeo. Feel unsafe in your own home. They made you feel like a guest who overstayed their welcome. I want you to build a room where you are the authority, where you feel untouchable. If you can build that, you can build anything. I took the check. I spent the next 3 months obsessed. I didn't just buy furniture. I curated an environment I tore up. The carpet to reveal the concrete subfloor. I painted the walls a deep slate gray that absorbed the light rather than reflecting it. I designed a custom L-shaped desk and hired a local welder to build the frame, negotiating the price down by pointing out flaws in his previous work. I installed soundproofing. I bought an ergonomic chair that felt like a cockpit. I created a space that wasn't soft or pretty. It was a command center. When it was finished, I called Robert in. He stood in the doorway, high-size, scanning the room. He checked fuels on the desk. He tested the throw off the light. He noted the acoustic panels. He turned to me and nodded. Just Tone's sharp, decisive nod. Good, he said. That nod was worth more than the $5. Oh, it was validation. It was the first time an adult had looked at something. I greeted and treated it with respect. Meanwhile, my phone kept buzzing with the ghost life of my other family. Mom just landed in Aspen. The twins look adorable in their ski gear. Dad, thinking of you. Hope you're studying hard. I scrolled past the photos of them drinking hot cocoa in a lodge I would never visit. I looked at their smiling, vacuous faces. Years ago, that would have crushed me. I would have wondered what was wrong with me. But sitting in me gray, silent sanctuary, surrounded by the smell of fresh paint and ozone, I realized something. The rejection hadn't broken me. It had freed me. I didn't need their approval to fill a room. I could build my own walls. The years blurred into a singular focus. I graduated high school early. I went to architecture school funded entirely by Robert, who called it an investment in infrastructure. I graduated top of my class. I started my own firm at 24. By 28, I was designing skylines. I was the architect, and my foundation wasn't shakable. Uncle Robert didn't fade. He concluded it was a business decision. His heart was failing. The structure and energy compromised beyond repair. He refused the hospital. He chose the master bedroom overlooking the ocean where he could monitor the tides. 2 days before the end, he summoned me. He went sentimental. He was strategic. Sit. He rasped his voice like dry Leavesden concrete. He pointed to a thick-sealed manila envelope on the nightstand. That is the demolition order. Do not open it until the reading. I won't. They will come back, Alyssa. The moment the heart monitor flatlines, they will smell the money. They think Ian, they're a TM. They think you are the janitor. He gripped my wrist. His strength surprising me. Don't let them in. Not into your head. Not into this house. He died on a Tuesday morning sufficiently between the hours of 4 and 5 a.m. I didn't cry then. I had work to do. I called the lawyer. I called the funeral home. I secured the perimeter. The funeral was held 3 days later. It was a small private service at the Cliffside Chapel, or it was supposed to. At 10:55 a.m., a fleet of 3 stretch limousines rolled up the gravel drive. They were rented. I recognized the company plates. My family stepped out. They were dressed in designer morning wear, black silk oversized sunglasses, veils. My mother, Susan, practically collapsed into my father's arms, sobbing loudly for a brother she hadn't spoken to in 15 years. My sisters, Ashley and Jessica, are live streaming their grief, dabbing at dry eyes with lace handkerchiefs. They looked like a bad production of a Greek tragedy. I stood by the grave wearing a sharp charcoal suit I designed myself. They walked right past me. They didn't see the CEO of a multi-million-dollar firm. They saw the 13-year-old girl in the frozen kitchen. They saw a non-entity. Poor Robert. I heard Susan whisper to Jeffrey loud enough for half the congregation to hear. Thank God hadn't Mary. The estate should cover the bankruptcy and the renovations on the summer house. They weren't mourning, they were calculating. After these advice, they cornered me near their hearse. They didn't hug me. They didn't ask how I was. Alyssa, my father said, his voice dripping with that familiar patronizing tone, "You look tired." I thought I was the nurse. "Well, take height from here, sweetie," my mother added, patting my arm with a gloved hand. "You've done your duty. We're going to head up to the house to appraise the furniture. We need to see what's worth keeping before the estate sale." She held out her hand. "Do you have the keys, or do I need to call a locksmith?" I looked at them, and suddenly the architecture of their cruelty made perfect sense. For them to be the Golden family, they needed a failure. They needed me to be the broken, abandoned niece who scrubbed at the floors. If they acknowledged that I was the one in power, that I was the architect, their entire self-image would collapse. They needed me to be small so they could feel big. They weren't just vultures. They were parasites starving for a host. "The lawyer has the keys, Elide," my voice flat and cold. "They're adding us tomorrow at the firm. Until then, the house is sealed." "Sealed?" Ashley scoffed. "It's our house tomorrow," I said, and turned my back on them. I walked to my car, got in, and watched them in the rearview mirror, arguing with the security guards I had hired to keep the gate locked. The conference room at the law firm was designed to intimidate. It was all dark mahogany floor-to-ceiling windows and air conditioning set to a temperature that kept you awake. My family sat on Noni's side of the table. I sat on the other. Jeffrey was checking his watch, tapping a manicured finger against that polished wood. Susan was whispering to twins, Ashley and Jessica, who were scrolling through real estate listings in their phones. They were already spending the money. They looked at me once with a mixture of pity and annoyance, like I was a stain on theatable cloth they couldn't quite scrub out. The lawyer, Mr. Sterling, entered the room. He didn't carry a briefcase. He carried a single thin file folder. Hess sat down at the head of the table and adjusted his glasses. "Robert preferred efficacy," he said, his voice dry as dust. "So I will be brief." "Just read the numbers," Jeffrey said, leaning back in his chair. We know he was liquid. Sterling ignored him. He opened the folder. "To my brother Jeffrey," he read, "I leave you the debt you accrued in 1998. The promissory note for the failed adventure is hereby forgiven. You are now solvent. You are welcome." Jeffrey blanked. "What? That debt was written off years ago. Where is the cash?" Sterling continued. "To my sister-in-law, Susan, I leave you the silence you gave your daughter. May it bring you the same comfort it brought her." Susan's mouthful open. "I don't understand. Is this a joke?" And finally, Sterling said, looking directly at me, "To my niece, Alyssa, the architect of her own life, I leave the entirety of my estate, the firm, the properties, the investment portfolios, and the residual assets. Everything." The silence in the room lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then it detonated. "That's illegal." Jeffrey slammed his hand on the table. "He was Neil. She manipulated him. She was his nurse. She coerced him. We're contesting this." Ashley screamed, dropping her phone. "That's our money. We're the family." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I watched them unravel with the detached interest of a scientist observing bacteria under a slide. Sterling raised a hand. "There is so many more document," he said. The room quieted heavy with the desperate hope that this was the correction, the real will. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller Sterling say to my parents, you claim Alyssa coerced Robert. However, this document suggests a different dynamic." He slid a piece off paper across the mahogany table toward Jeffrey. It was yellowed with age. I recognized Robert's sharp, angular handwriting, and next to it the loopy, careless signatures of my parents. "What is this?" Susan whispered. "A loan agreement," Sterling said. "Dated December 24th, 15 years ago. The day you left for the Bahamas, my blood ran cold. The date. The frozen turkey, the empty house. You borrowed $500,000 from Robert Sterling," continued his voice devoid of emotion, "to cover gambling debts and festal maintenance. Robert agreed to pay. On one condition. He pointed to a clause at the bottom of the page. Collateral Sterling Reed. In exchange for the sum, Jeffrey and Susan Miller agreed to waive all parental claim to Alyssa Miller. They agreed to transfer physical custody to Robert Miller and cease all financial and emotional support. They agreed that the child is burden of... The lender, the world stopped turning. They hadn't forgotten. They hadn't just been negligent. They had sold me. I looked at the paper. $500,000. That was my price tag. That was why they never called. That was why they never came back. It wasn't because I wasn't lovable. It was because they had cashed the check. I looked up at my prints. I expected to see shame. I expected to see regret. Instead, I saw annoyance. We were in a bind, Jeffrey said, his voice rising in defense. Had all the money. It was the only way he would help us. We did what we had to do to survive. We gave you a better life, didn't we? You lived in a mansion, Dot. We sacrificed you, Susan cried, tears streaming down her face, tears for herself. It cost you exactly $500,000, I said. My voice didn't shake. It was the voice of the architect, and you spent it all. This is entrapment, Jeffrey shouted at the lawyer. You can't hold that against us. We want our share. You got your share, I said. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. 15 years ago, you traded a daughter for Alifastyle. The transaction is complete. I looked at the document one. Last time, Dot, it wasn't a tragedy. It was a receipt. The room was silent, save for the hum off the air conditioning. I stood there looking down at the people who had given life and then sold it for a quick payout. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt clarity, the kind of clarity used when you finally see the structural flaw in a building that's been doomed from the start. Alyssa, my mother whimpered, reaching a hand toward me. Please, were your parents? I looked at her hand. It was trembling. Not with love, but with the desperate realization that the ATM was closed. No, I said, your borrowers and your credit is no good here. I turned and walked out off the conference room. I didn't look back. I walked through the lobby of the law firm, past the receptionist, who nodded respectfully, and out into the bright, blinding sunlight of the parking lot. I got into my car and drove. I drove past city limits, past the suburbs where families were living lives I would never understand, and up the winding coastal road to the cliffside house, my house. When I arrived, the gate was open. Security was escorting a familiar black sedan off the property. My parents, they had come straight here, hoping to a big steel break-in. I stopped my car in the driveway and got out. Jeffrey saw him. He rolled down his window, his facet twisted with rage. You ungrateful little, get off my property, I said. My voice was calm. It carried over the sound of the ocean below. Or I will have A.O. arrested for trespassing. Isn't over, he screamed as the security guard waved him forward. We'll sue. We'll take everything. You already took everything I said, and you spent it. Now get out. I watched them drive away, their taillights disappearing around the bend. Then I turned back to the house, the brutalist concrete structures. Against the sky, stark and unyielding, it wasn't warm. It wasn't fuzzy, but it was strong. I walked inside and closed the heavy front door. I turned the lock. Click. It was the most satisfying sound I'd ever heard. I walked to the kitchen, opened my laptop, and logged into my contacts. Susan Miller, delete. Jeffrey Miller, delete. Ashley Miller, delete. Jessica Miller, delete. One by one, I erased them. I blocked their numbers. I filtered their emails. Totrish. I dismantled the connection with the same precision I used to draft blueprints. I closed the laptop. The house was silent. The table in the evening room, the massive mahogany table where Robert had taught me how to negotiate, how to plan, how to win, was empty. It was perfect. Have you ever had to build your own family from scratch? Share your story in the comments.